Shanti, Shanti. Namaste to everybody who is here. I'm Karuna Mohan, and I work in the Veda Niketan. And I'd like to welcome everybody to our second lecture this year on the Back to the Veda series. As you all will know, we have a series of lectures that are in place, and we are dealing with the range of matters pertaining to our 100 years. The APS, as you all know, has turned 100 years, and this set of lectures replaces the need for a physical conference. I will be moderating these lectures for all and for all the series. And our first set of lectures in February, March, and April covers the Arya Samaj in South Africa from 1860 to present day. In the last lecture, Ghulam Bhai shared the context of the arrival of the Indians up to the formation of the APS in 1925. Today, our focus is going to be on the on the history, relevance, and obviously also on the issue of what common bonds and common fates we have, what shared histories we have. In the last lecture, the shared histories of indenture, improving the status and position of people, and uniting Hindus was a key focus. Let's get a glimpse today of our shared histories with our fellow Aryas across other parts of the world. I have the greatest of pleasure in welcoming Professor Brij Maharaj, who lectures at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in geography. Other than being a world-renowned academic, he recently has returned from India, where he did a lecture tour. And he's also the vice president of the South African Hindu Mahasabha. In today's lecture, he's going to discuss the formation of the Arya Samaj in South Africa and abroad. And without further ado, I'd like to hand you over to Brij Bhai, who is having some problems with his things, but I'm pretty sure he will be able to give us a decent lecture. Thank you, Brij. Go ahead.
Namaste, colleagues. Thank you for that introduction, Karuna. Firstly, congratulations to the Arya Samaj South Africa. You know, I'm old school. I'm used to saying APS. Sounds, easier for me. I'd like to congratulate the APS on its 100th anniversary. And I'd like to thank the leadership of the APS for inviting me to make this presentation. I know there is at least one colleague from Trinidad, so I've got one slide dedicated to Trinidad. I'm glad I've done that. I'm going to share my screen. We have a power problem right now in our area. Hopefully it will sort itself out. Let me get the screen share off. Yeah, okay, it's coming up. Karuna, is that visible?
It's not visible yet, Rich, but it's going to come up.
Now?
No, we're seeing your Zoom screen.
Oh, sorry. Now can you see my? I see mine.
We're seeing your video. We're not seeing your
Right,
screen.
you can see. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now sure. Now, Kalman, that work?
Now it's going to come up. Okay, we're seeing
Right.
it now.
Thank you. Okay. Great.
Go
Thank you.
ahead.
So I was given a fairly free hand, and I think that's what academics want. So I'm talking about the Arya Samaj at 100 in South Africa. I'm looking at historical origins and early influence and relevance, in a sense, across the Indian diaspora. I'm taking a few examples. So this is the structure of this presentation. Let me move this around, but yeah. So let me acknowledge I see many familiar names and faces on this Zoom. I'm grateful for you for attending. And you know, I'm dabbling with history as a geographer that has its own risks. So what I've done, I've actually made a list of, normally we put our references at the end. I'm putting my main references at the beginning because you got a sense of my sources. And I've read some fascinating theses. For example, there was a 1984 thesis on the Arya Samaj in Trinidad. It's a PhD actually. And in South Africa, you know, Karthi Gopalan.
Did we lost you? Hello, Bridge.
Yeah, his screen is frozen.
Yeah. Thanks, Kiran. While we're waiting for Bridge.
Apologies, I'm back.
Oh,
Yeah,
you're back.
I got bumped off. I'm really sorry. I think we're used to some of these technical glitches now. Is the screen share visible?
Yes, we can see you. We can see you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Yeah, okay. Thank you. So, yeah, if you're looking at the formation of the Arya Samaj, we know it, and I can go very fast here. We're looking at 1875. It was established in Mumbai, and it had a very strong support base in Haryana and Punjab. And on the right, in blue, on my right, I've just got some of the Arya Samaj branches in different countries. And there's an expansion of this on this slide here. And I apologize for the very small writing. I'm packing a lot here. But I'm also just flagging on my right again the number of Hindu reform movements that came up after the Arya Samaj. And when the Arya Samaj was formed, there were largely two organizations that I can recall. It was APS, and I mean the Arya Samaj, and then you had the Brahmo Samaj, if I recall correctly. Since then, it has expanded a lot. Now, the founder was Swami Dayanand Saraswati, and he is seen as one of the most influential, leaders of his generation in India. He's got the India Today magazine argued that he was credited for his logic, scientific and critical thinking, religious faiths, and for bringing a revolution in the notion of divinity. He was also called a Maharishi. This is just another slide focusing on a summary of what he did. I'm focusing on the Vedas, opposition to the caste system, promoting Indian nationalism and opposing colonial oppression and exploitation, celebrating Indian history, culture, and the language, drawing attention to environmental awareness, once again, the scientific thought. And of course, he's famous for Satya Prakash, the treatise, I'll call it. You are familiar with the 10 principles of the Arya Samaj. I'm not going to go into details. You'll find a common theme. There is the focus on the truth. In fact, I was trying to highlight that across the 10 principles. So since we're talking about how the ideas of Arya Samaj was transported and transmitted across the indentured diaspora, this is just a summary of the different areas where indentured Indians were transported. The numbers are given there. Since I'm a geographer, I thought I'll throw in a map, because I'll be talking about Trinidad, Guyana, and Mauritius before I come to South Africa. But just briefly, we know about the indentured system, exploitation of labor, and the historian Hugh Tinker called it a new form of slavery. Bhikkhu Parekh was based in the UK. I actually think he's now called Lord Bhikkhu Parekh. Argued or identified 3 features that were particular to Hindu indentured workers. And he spoke about the reconstitution of family life, especially in its patriarchal form, the religious conviction, and especially the adoption of the Ramayana as the essential text. Now, what's important is that the indentured Hindus who went to the different countries and islands, and with the exception of Malaysia, it's linked to sugarcane. So someone would want to do a thesis looking at the link between sugarcane and indentured labor. And then you can add in diabetes as well. They went as individuals, they didn't go as families. And that's a very important point. And the ratio of males to female was uneven. In many parts, it was up to 8 men to 1 woman. And in Natal, our province, is a little bit better, 1:4. So as we
It seems like Bridge has dropped off again. Really sorry about this. He is having some technical difficulties where he is in terms of the lack of electricity. So I think I just like to place into context what we're looking at. We're looking at the Arya Samaj formed in India, but having a global outreach. And we know that the Arya Samaj, in a sense, was a good point of the indenture system. But the indenture system itself actually caused a lot of problems for the people who were there. And so how did the Arya Samaj actually take off is the foresight of the Arya Samaj in India, and particularly Swami Dayanand, because a lot of the people had fears of what they call the Kala Pani, going across the sea. And you had the Arya Samaj missionaries that actually went to all the countries. And I think once we delve properly into the history, we will find that a number of them actually were there and we're getting on. At this point, I'd like to open up for anybody who'd like to share any points on this particular issue of the spread of the Arya Samaj, while I check where Bridge is and whether he's back on. He's struggling to come on. Okay, is there anybody who would like to say something about this or has any questions on it? Kiranbai, are you in a position to ask a question? Okay, if not, then let's look at the three things that were raised. The first being the breakdown of family life. The second being the issue of the Ramayana being very popular amongst the indentured workers. And I think an important issue would be how they dealt with caste, because they brought caste in themselves. Bridge is back on. Thank you, Bridge.
I'm terribly sorry. I'm
no,
really
that's
sorry.
okay. Carry on. We're quite experienced in dealing with these things. Yeah. So
am I visible?
Not yet. You're still sharing screen. Go ahead. You are now visible.
Okay. So I was talking about the different principles of or characteristics of Hinduism, and the reestablishment of the family, and it took a patriarchal form, and given the uneven ratios between women and men. Of course, the Hindus brought, they came with different castes. I heard you speak about castes, so there's connection, languages, regions, their religious beliefs, etc. And it's important to note, most of them were largely illiterate. They could barely read and write. So whatever came by memory. And over time, my view is memory distorts. And what you see across this sector is the increasing attempt by Christian missionaries to convert using the incentives of free education and obviously economic opportunities. And the other aspect of indentured Hinduism is the adoption of the Ramayana as a religious text. And this is because the indentured felt they were suffering in exile like Ram, and that after they're
Hello, it seems like we've lost Bridge again. So, Bridge, your sound is not coming through.
It's frozen.
So Karuna, is he having load shedding in his area, or is it maybe because of the service provider that he has?
It is load shedding as well.
He did indicate that he is having load shedding, electrical problems.
Yeah.
Vishnubai, do you want to
Yes.
tell us a little bit about Trinidad?
In aspect of the development of Arya Samaj,
That's correct.
the network of, or the beginning of Arya Samaj throughout the world is very similar for each country as it is to South Africa. He's back.
He's back. I know. Let him set up and get going. So let's carry on with it. Thanks so much, Vishnubai. Rich Bhai, you can carry on.
Yeah. And so it's interesting. We spoke about the Ramayana and why they, it appealed to those under indenture and the inhuman conditions under which they labored. An interesting point was that in Suriname, you had a Maulana, Munshi Rehman Khan, who introduced the Ramayana to the Hindus there. Professor Mohan Gautam from the Netherlands has done some very interesting work here. Then we had caste segmentation that, well, I would say diminished or almost disappeared because they had come across on the same boat. They shared the utensils. They're now called Jiaji Bais, so they are shipmates. And which is one of the positives, which I know that even in India, there was a suggestion that there was a Singhvi commission, and they argued that India could learn from the indentured diaspora. So I turn now to talk briefly about the Arya Samaj in Mauritius. So here in 1898, a soldier was named Bholanath Tiwari.
Vishnubai, do you want to say something while we wait for him to come back on?
The idea of the Arya Samaj, the spreading of the Arya Samaj throughout the world, I think it followed, they examined the way the British established themselves in the different islands and brought them under the government of Britain under that time. And I think from that model, they observed and the pre-runners or the sannyas who left India and made the establishment of Arya Samaj in these different islands in the Caribbean or wherever, followed a similar pattern from island to island. So they went island hopping or nation hopping, if you want to call it that. And they utilized this one common methodology across all of them. Maybe there were slight variations out there. But remember that all of the people who they were talking to in these islands were all indentured laborers. That was common to all of them, with the majority of them coming from the Indian population. The African population in most of these islands, and I can speak directly with Trinidad and Guyana and Suriname, had already left sugar plantation when the Indians came in. And so they were not too much around to influence the Indian population. In Trinidad, there was a major struggle between the African population and the Indian population, in that the African population holds strongly to the belief that they were here first, and therefore they were entitled, as opposed to the Indian population, the indentured laborers. And part of that struggle still exists today, despite being independent since 1962. We still mention it, how it shows up in the government sector or in the both private and public sector very clearly, and there are these divide lines that separate us, despite government intervention to try to merge the two ethnic groups.
Thank you very much, Vishnu Bhai. Our speaker is back on.
Yes,
Before you start, Bridge, I just want to check with Shanil. He had his hand up. Shanil, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to suggest that perhaps, given the reality of power and load shedding and all of that, and it is a really interesting lecture, but by having it broken up like this, we're losing a lot of the value. Perhaps we do it another day so that we can, Rajabhai can go continuously through at ease.
I'm in a webinar.
Yeah, rather than being, worried about it breaking up every few minutes. So that's just a suggestion, but I think we'll get more value that way. Thanks. Namaste.
I'll tell you what I've done. I have switched the data thing. I'm using another data source. Let's see. I think if it bombs out again, then we should reschedule. Karuna, will that be okay?
I think that's fine, Prof. Carry on, and let's see how it goes. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm very sorry. Yeah. So, yeah, I was talking about the Mauritian experience where an individual is an Indian soldier who spent 3 years here, left the Satyaprakash behind, and 3 individuals, and I got the names there, Gopal, Daljit Lal, and Lala, who used that book, and they started conducting weekly satsang, doing the havans and the bhajans and so on. But the Arya Samaj was formally established in Mauritius in May 1911 with someone called, his name was Manilal Doctor. Now, he's not a doctor, he's actually a lawyer with links to Mahatma Gandhi. And then there was a physician, Dr. Chiranjeev Bharadwaj, was also involved in establishing the Arya Samaj in Mauritius. Now, in Trinidad, the educated Indian, this is very interesting. There was an increasing awareness of the Arya Samaj and its principles among those who were educated. And you notice in brackets I put class. So if caste is disappearing, you're kind of seeing a new form of class emerging. And it's interesting that Christian Indians were also more informed about the Arya Samaj than some of the Hindus. And there were some names there. There's Ramchandran, was a Christian Ramcharan, and his Hindu associate. They actually ran a newspaper, T.R. Mahabir Singh. Now, Mahabir Singh became a member of the Arya Samaj after he visited Calcutta in 1922. Ramcharan supported the Arya Samaj, but he remained a Christian. Now, there were many Christian mission schools in Trinidad. And if you wanted to be educated, etc., invariably you had to convert. And I think this came out very clearly in Nepal's classic, The House of Biswas. And in the 1930s, the Arya Samaj established itself as an agency for representing broad Indian interests, education, social welfare, and religion. Then you had the Arya Samaj in Guyana. Once again, there was concerns about conversion to Christianity, but there was also a researcher by the name of Pandey from Jawaharlal Nehru University called Syncretism between Christianity and Hinduism and Islam. And I'm just going to quote here, many Indians accept baptism and membership of the churches without abandoning their participation in Hindu rituals. And one often sees pictures of Christ on the walls of Indian homes alongside those of Krishna, Hanuman, or Rama. And this is an indication of some kind of tolerance as well that existed there at that time. Now, I should put this name in bold. Bhai Parmana played an important role in promoting the Arya Samaj in Trinidad, Guyana, and South Africa. I'm going to talk about him a little later He also encouraged the formation of Hindu schools in Guyana to counter the attempts of the mission schools, Christian mission schools, to convert Hindus. Now, coming to Arya Samaj, South Africa, there's a classic work done by late Pandit Nardev Vedlankar. You can download it from this website. It's titled Religious Awakening in South Africa, History of the Arya Samaj. It's a very good, history of the organization. It's quite long. I think it's almost 100 pages. It's worth reading and downloading. So in South Africa, what is interesting, the first Arya Samaj organization outside India was formed in South Africa. And that was in 1904, before any missionary came. And there are some names which I think we should write a lot more about. Babu Padam Singh, Makan Singh, Gai Singh, Bikari Maharaj, and Pragji Soni. I'm sure some of the Arya Samaj literature may have more about these individuals, but they were pioneers. And in 1912, in April, the Arya Yuvak Sabha was formed under the leadership of Swami Shankaranand for the moral and spiritual betterment of Hindus. And the central organization, after several branches were formed, you have the central organization, the Arya Pradinidhi Sabha in Natal, was established in 22nd Feb 1925, and Swami Bhavani Dayal was vice president. Now, some of the activities which you are familiar with was promoting education, but especially Hindi. So in 1948, together with the APS and the Sanatan Sabha, who are ideologically opposed, far more sharply in those days than today, I think everyone will agree with that. Pandit Nardev spoke to both organizations, said, listen, notwithstanding your ideological differences, you'll promote Hindi. Why don't you come together? And that's what they did. And it's a sign of the maturity of the leaders at that time that they formed the Hindi Shiksha Sangh, which just, I think, celebrated 75 years, so 2 years ago. Then the other critical factor in terms of social reform and was highly innovative, and I think it could be a world first for the Hindu sector, was when the APS promoted the training of a woman priest. Yeah, I think it's a world first, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. And we had the Vedic Purohit Mandal. There are a number of social and community service initiatives, and I think the ABH would be right at the top on the Yuvak Sabha, and the leadership of Mr. Ramboros, who I think was also president of the APS for a long time and was vice president of the South African Hindu Mahasabha. Many members of the Arya Samaj were also active in the struggle against apartheid. And then you had the Veda Nikatan, which was doing a lot of research, a lot of writing, and propagation material was being produced. And there's tons of it on the website. This is a shot from your website, the APS website, to give you a sense of the female priests, and I assume some of the gurus are there as well. Now, I want to turn now to talk about, I'll say personalities, because they were really amazing personalities in what they did. So Bhai Parmanand came into South Africa in August 1925, and initially stayed with Gandhi. Now, there was some tension between Gandhi and some of the Arya Samaj Swamis. I'm not going to go into the details, especially with Swami Shankarananda Ji. So when Bhai Parmanand spent some time with Gandhi, Gandhi asked him to focus less on the Arya Samaj reforms and more on education. And I'm quoting here, we feel that Indians in South Africa are not ready to receive any doctrines of reformation. The needs of Indians, so far as internal work is concerned, consists of education, and as much of it of the right kind as can be had. The best thing we venture to think that Professor Parmanand can do is to turn his attention to this phase of the question. It is the most practical and effective mode of exhibiting the strength, purity, and usefulness of the Samaj he represents. So Bhai Parmanand, he established several organizations. The most famous was the Hindu Reform Society in South Africa and the Hindu Young Men's Association in Pietermaritzburg. Now, the importance of the Hindu Young Men's Association stemmed from the fact that it consisted of several Tamil-speaking Hindus, and this was the first organization in the country whose membership consisted mainly of former indentured Indians. So these were the first group of maybe the descendants of indentured laborers, some were educated, some were business persons, etc. And then Bhai Parmanand was actually giving lectures across the country where there were Hindus were staying. Now, I think what's important, and Dr. Karthi Gopalan makes this point, that Parmanand is credited with making the first attempt to foster awareness among Hindus of the common religion and trying to unite the different linguistic groups. Now, this was very important because there was linguistic divisions, there was division based on geographic origins, which part of India you came from, etc. After Bhai Parmanand left, Swami Shankaran arrived in October 1908, and he said that the problem with Hindus was they had many different ideals and ways of realizing their God. They had to settle their differences and work for the common greater good of all. Once again, the need for unity. He traveled across Nepal to promote Hindu unity, promoted the Vedas and the Hindi language. And the Swami was also keen to reconvert Christian Indians back to Hinduism. He expressed concern that the Christian mission school forced the study of Bible upon students, and the same issues came up in Guyana and Trinidad earlier. However, it's important to note that mission schools were pioneers in Indian education, and that without the efforts of missionaries, many Indians would not have received access to elementary education. And I think if you look at India as well, I think the Indian elite, the Hindu elite, if you look at which school they go to in Mumbai and Delhi, etc., you'll find it's often the Catholic schools. An important contribution of Swami Shankaran was to get Diwali recognized as a Hindu festival in the city and the Devon municipality in 1910. Up to that point, Hindus were participating in the Muslim festival of Muharram. He also led Ramnami celebrations at the Amgani Road Temple. Now, a significant event took place in May 1912. He organized a gathering of South African Hindus to bring Hindus together under one structure, one banner. And this meeting, where Hindu organizations, temple committees across the country were invited, was referred to as a landmark event for Hindus. The Minister of the Interior was requested to allow access for delegates to the province. Remember, the Indians couldn't move freely between provinces, and there's also an attempt to ask a concession in the railways to make that trip affordable. About 500 delegates attended between 31st of May and 2nd June. And the big concern was upliftment of Hinduism. And there were 5 issues dealt with: the formation of a national body, the promotion of Hindu education, the popularization of Hindu festivals, the establishment of Hindu cultural and religious institutions, and increasing participation of women in these activities. The South African Hindu Mahasabha was established, and Swami Shankaran was the first president. He had to leave in South Africa in May 1913, and his key aim was to bring Hindus together. And this is very important. He refrained from referring to the Arya Samaj to avoid being labeled as an advocate of a specific ideological group. Instead, he asserted that he represented all Hindus. When he motivated Hindus to establish new religious organizations, he avoided naming them the Arya Samaj, but opted for names like the Veda Dharma Sabha, which still exists in Pietermaritzburg. Now, Bhavani Daya, before he became a Swami from Johannesburg, evaluated Swami Shankaran's influence on Hinduism in South Africa as follows. On reaching Natal, I noted the effects of his religious propaganda, which have created in the Hindus who at one time were groping in the darkness faith in Vedic Dharma, devotion to Aryan culture, interest in Sandhya and Havan, pride in the festival, practice in greeting one another with namaste, a feeling for the mother tongue and respect for the mother country. So these were seen to be the outcomes of the intervention of Swami Shankaran. Now, I've decided to focus briefly on Swami Bhavani Dayal because he was a South African. He was the first president of the Arya Samaj and was also a political leader in the Natal Indian Congress and was involved in the activities of the Indian Congress. So briefly, he was born in Johannesburg. He left with his father to India, received some education there, joined the Indian Freedom Swadeshi movement. Here's another area from research. I think there were several Indians from South Africa who joined the freedom struggle sometimes at great personal cost. And he was appointed the Arya Samaj preacher at the age of 18 in Bihar. He became a sannyasi after his wife passed away. I mentioned his role in the NIC. He worked closely with Mahatma Gandhi. He was also involved in the Satyagraha campaign. He provided guidance and support for NIC members as well, and using his Vedic knowledge and understanding of Hinduism. He mobilized the Indian community to participate in the NIC political activities like protests, marches, and petitions. He also advocated for the rights of Indians in the country. So against this background, and these are not necessarily my views, it's a reflective group in social media. The question has been, why did the Arya Samaj not flourish beyond North India? Because it's very influential in Punjab and Haryana, as I mentioned previously. There were regional variations, religious practices. Many traditional practices were deeply entrenched. So there's always resistance to reformist ideas. There was opposition from established orthodox religious institutions. There was competition from other reform movements. I mentioned the Brahma Samaj, and then the Theosophical Society also emerged during this period. The movement thrived in North India and Punjab and Haryana, and because of the socio-political context of the region, I think in southern India and eastern India, the social, economic, and political and religious dynamics were very different. The language was very different as well. It's largely Bengali, and then you had in South India different derivations of the Dravidian language. Then the caste system was entrenched, and caste identity made it very difficult to unify diverse groups. And then you had India was experiencing from the 1870s, while the Industrial Revolution was in full force in the Western world, in the colonies it was starting, and you had the first element of that was urbanization, and new organizations were emerging, and I listed them. And I wouldn't say there was competition, but they had their own impacts. So to conclude, the Arya Samaj emerged as a movement during the peak of colonial dominance in India, when the enlistment of indentured laborers for the colonies was at its highest. In the various colonies, the Arya Samaj missionaries addressed the threat of Hindu conversion to Christianity and the anxiety over losing culture, language, and religion. In different countries, there were Arya Samaj initiatives aimed at enhancing the status and standing of indentured laborers and their descendants, while also preserving the religious and cultural language. The Arya Samaj offered a space for the caste system to diminish amongst the members, allowing the lower caste to study and chant the Vedas. Nonetheless, in certain instances, class took the place of caste as an indicator of social differentiation. In South Africa, the singular contribution of the early Arya Samaj missionaries was the establishment of the South African Hindu Mahasabha as the national umbrella organization for all Hindus, regardless of the language, geographical origins in India, and the ideological belief systems, a legacy that endures to this day. In order to achieve this unity, both Bhai Parmanand and Swami Sardhanand had to underplay the umbilical connection with the Arya Samaj. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brijpai.
And I'm really sorry about this. I think the Lords have worked in our favor. It ran smoothly.
We told you Reshma was going to pray, so we should be okay with it. So, friends, we've now heard the lecture. Are there any questions, comments from anybody? I'd like to welcome Acharya Brando. Namaste, Acharya Ji. Thank you for coming all the way from the USA onto this. And namaste to Asha Lata also.
Namaste.
Namaste to all my brothers and sisters in South Africa. This is Asha Lata Chate
from the Netherlands in the Northern Hemisphere. Congratulations, Bridge Bhai. You have delivered a wonderful lecture and prepared it so well. I would like to have a copy of that. And perhaps I could also include some things which I knew from my father and grandfather, B. Parmeswar, and my grandfather's brother, Meghraj, who was the first secretary of the Arya Samaj when it was formed in Durban at that time on the 22nd of February. So I appreciate how well prepared Bridge Bhai has presented his presentation. Wonderful, Bhaiji. I'm so proud of you because my father would be very proud of you because you were his student at the Merebank High School. So that touches my heart, that connection with you and my dad as principal and student. And how wonderful you are serving the community, Bridge Bhai, with all the cultural and educational, geographical knowledge that you have. Wonderful, really. And it is needed for our children and the youth of South Africa, as well as in the world. And Arya Samaj is blooming everywhere. The feelings of wanting to know more about our past, about our culture and civilization is blooming in Europe, in other parts of the world. Hope to meet all of you someday in South Africa, sunny South Africa. And blessings to all of you and especially to Bridge Bhai. Thank you, Bhaiji.
Thank you very much, Asha Ji.
Thank you, Asha
I'm
Benji.
glad you
Very
picked up
very
on
flattering.
Bridge and not me. So, Bridge, do you have any comment on that?
No, I mean, I know Asha Benji we're involved in the Merebank Book Project, and she always talks to us about, her dad and his influence on us, which those of you who know Mr. Chitoy, if you ever had to be a student or work with him, we used to have his morning prayer. I think it should be 15 or 20 minutes. And you can be at the peak somewhere in Durban, you got to listen to the prayer. I think we had people, the type of leaders. She mentioned Mr. Meghraj, and I picked that up. I didn't have to.
Okay, while Bridge, again, I just want to say to everybody that the presentation that Bridge has given us will be in the May issue of the Ved Jyoti. And the April issue of the Ved Jyoti will have Ghulam's full presentation presented to us.
I'm back on. If there's any questions,
yes. Okay.
Karna, I could take it, or comments.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments?
One thing,
it's Arti. Namaste.
Go ahead, Arti.
Namaste.
Okay.
I just want to comment, it's not a question. You spoke about the Ramayana bringing people together, and it's what kept them following whatever they remembered of their religion till the missionaries came. But we must also remember that most of the indentured laborers were from the south, and they had very little knowledge of the Ramayana. As a result, a lot of them were converted to Christianity. And this has not only happened here in South Africa, but in other parts of the world where indentured laborers went, as well as in Assam. Wherever there were South Indian indentured laborers, they were converted easily because they felt it was, better to follow the Christian religion. So, but I also want to say thank you very much. I echo what Asha has said, and it's been a very, very wonderful presentation in spite of all the hiccups. Thank you. Namaste.
Thanks, Artiben. You see, the only country where you had you have a larger proportion of indentured laborers from South Africa. Suriname, Fiji, Tobago, Trinidad, Guyana, all had dominance of people from Bihar and UP. And I think it was the language factor. You see, even the missionaries, you notice they always spoke about Hindi, all the missionaries, and these are the three I highlighted. They promoted Hindi. In fact, there's no reference to Tamil in any of the literature that I've read. And I think that's part of the problem, the way in which we were communicating. And I think the language divide almost isolated the South community. Now that we're talking about it, I'm just thinking aloud. And when people get isolated and marginalized, and you get a sense of status and recognition in another religion, remember, on a Sunday, you put your tie and suit and go to church, you get a sense of dignity and respect. And during the weekdays, you could be working for the municipality. So, and this is what I think the Arya Samaj tried to do as well. They were replicating, the weekly satsang, the havans, etc. And I used to joke, I don't know how many, I think Robin Bhai may remember this. I used to always joke with my Arya Samaj friends and colleagues that, show me an Arya Samaj without a tie and suit. I used to attend many meetings and I used to stand out like a sore thumb because, I struggled to wear a jacket. But I think the notion of dignity and respect, the way in which language could have divided people is scope for more research, actually. We need to actually, interrogate the work of Karthik Gopalan, for example, and see where that would take us. In fact, I'm going to talk to him because he's been through the archives, etc. But it's a valid point. I think as researchers, we often look for new ideas and look for gaps.
Thank you, Bridgebhai. Are there any further comments, questions? Bridgebhai, I think we're getting a sense of the political life, we're getting a sense of the spiritual life. But there is a point that we seem to not be really putting, and that is the issue of integration. And earlier on, when you dropped off, then Vishnubhai was talking about that Indians were imported into colonies, and in the colonies, there were other race groups, and in particular, the manner in which the integration with the indigenous people, whether it's in South Africa, we have a lot of terminology that comes out, and that enough of that hasn't been written. You call them Ravan, you call them Karya. Obviously, it has certain connotations. And the same occurred in all other places. And I think that's an area that's a bit of a gap in terms of our writings.
No, in terms of, there was total separation. I remember the colonial authorities, they played the divide and rule strategy, which still persists, whether it's in Trinidad or any of the Caribbean islands, Suriname, or South Africa. I think in South Africa, the way in which the participation in the non-racial struggle actually gave us that opportunity for some kind of integration. But look at this, and I've written about it. You can download it in Maverick and even my academic work, where I've used this phrase, Hamba Kaya Mambe, how quickly, almost 10 years after democracy, you have this chance, Hamba Kaya Mambe, go back home to Mambe. So whilst I think there's prejudices in our community, I think there's prejudice in the other communities as well. And I think in South Africa, we need to talk more openly about race issues. While I'm speaking, I'm just going to put in my battery. The laptop is now saying on power bank. I can still hear you, Karuna. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. So that's one area. And I think the other area that actually has a gap is the social life. And, you're referring to it in terms of the suits. But the reality that the Arya Samaj promoted equality, and in many senses, it was a way for people to actually improve their social status. and become equal and drop caste aside. And that's quite an important aspect to look at, how social life improved, and what else happened. Because often the question is, how did the Indians really improve? And they improved because they had a strong spiritual life, and they adopted Christian approaches in some instances, but also they were looking seriously to improve the status, not only their own status, but the status of people in their communities. So, those are some of the gaps that's there. If there are no other questions, I don't see any hands raised. I think it's time for us to round up. And in rounding up, I'd like to just announce to everybody our next lecture, which will be in April. And that lecture is on the building of temples in South Africa within the Arya Samaj. And perhaps I could just share with everybody that in March, we will be having our main event on the 100th anniversary of the Arya Samaj at the Kendra. So watch out for the invitation. It's probably on its way to you. And at this event, we will be launching the 7th edition of the Aryan Prayer. And Asha ji, I want to confirm that Panditji and Uncle Sukraj today are the authors, and they mentioned in the book very clearly and very firmly. So going forward, the error that we've made in the past is rectified, and we want to assure you that Uncle Chote's name is in the book. Thereafter, the book
Thank you very much.
Thereafter, the book would be available for sale on the website and at the office. On the 6th of April, the Vedram Sabha Pietermaritzburg will be celebrating 116 years. And during this time, there will be 3 guests from India in the country. So those of you who are interested in good music, nice Arya Samaj bhajans, and some good discourses, please do attend all the events that's going to be happening in Pietermaritzburg. On the 13th of April, we will be having a Bahukundiyajya to commemorate the 150th anniversary of the Arya Samaj at the Raistop Arya Samaj grounds. We'd like to thank Brejbhai for the focus, the deep interest, and for delving as a geographer into history, but especially for sharing your views and spending the hour with us, and for consolidating the input that's presented today. As mentioned previously, this input will be on the May issue of the Ved Jyoti. Our next lecture will be on the 16th of April, and hopefully we won't have many technical problems. So thank you very much to everybody. I now hand over to Reshma to close the meeting with prayer. Reshma ji, please, can you close the meeting? Reshma ji, you muted.
Thank you. Om Yah Shantir Antariksham Shanti Prithvi Shantir Apah Shantir Ohradhaya Shanti Vanaspatayah Shantir Vishve Devah Shantir Brahma Shanti Sarvam Shanti Shanti Sama Shantir Edhi Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. 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 Shanti
Namaste to all, and thank you for attending.